As EFL literature teachers, we want students to read, think, talk, and connect. But we also need ideas that work in a real classroom. My aim is to share practical, engaging literature units that reach every student. New content is added regularly, so subscribe so you know what comes next. Okay, we're going to be looking at a unit of a short story written by Morley Callaghan, All the Years of Her Life. It's going to be taught in a mixed level class. On the surface, it seems like a simple story about a young man caught stealing from a drugstore. But it develops into something much deeper. The hidden cost our choices have on others. In this unit, students will explore the text through interactive strategies such as frozen scenes, role play, and movement-based activities. Through these activities, they examine responsibility, dignity, and the emotional impact of our actions. Ultimately, the unit transforms a simple narrative into a very meaningful exploration of character, empathy, and integrity. Here's how the two levels are going to work. Everyone reads the same story and does the same core activities. But our B1 students get more scaffolding, focusing on events, feelings, and clear reasons with support along the way. Our B2 students go deeper, interpreting motives, weighing different readings, and defending ideas with detailed evidence. The intellectual demand is different, but both groups stay equally active in predicting, moving, debating, and performing together. A quick background for you before we get into the activities. This isn't something that you'd share with your students before the opening mystery. Alfred, a young shop attendant, is caught stealing small items from the drugstore where he works. And his boss, Mr. Carr, calls his mother rather than immediately involving the police. The turning point comes later in the scene of the kitchen when Alfred notices his mother's trembling hands and he begins to understand the emotional weight of what he has done. That moment, from a public incident to a private moment, is what brings the unit's central ideas: dishonesty, trust, responsibility, dignity, and most important, the hidden emotional costs to life. We begin with a pre-reading hook, so hold off on the title. Show 5 objects or pictures of a lipstick, toothpaste, a compact, telephone, and a cup of tea. And with just this line, it is closing time. A young worker is about to leave the shop. His boss looks at him and quietly says, "Just a moment before you go." Most objects fit a drugstore easily, but the cup of tea doesn't. And that mismatch is exactly what makes students want to solve it. Leave it unexplained. It becomes a key to the whole story later. You can show your students these 4 prompts to keep the discussion moving. Who is the worker? And what can students guess about the setting? Why does the boss stop him? Which objects matter most and could be a red herring? And what happens next? What will the boss do? What will the worker say? In a sense, students are already reading, noticing details, and building theories before a single line of the story appears. This activity gets students physically moving instead of just discussing from their desk. Each corner represents a possible outcome: losing the job, the police being called, a parent being called, or disappointing someone who trusts you. Students then move to the corner they think is the worst, explaining their reason and hearing other students' perspectives. Keeping track of where everyone lands, you'll return to these same corners once the story is finished. Keep in mind, the story is read in 5 stages, not straight through, which keeps the tension alive and lets students test and revise predictions. Stage 1 is the theft, checking which predictions held up. Stage 2 has students ranking Alfred's fears. Stage 3 has group building a frozen scene before Mrs. Higgins arrives. Stage 4 in the drugstore scene, looking at her calm dignity and Mr. Carr's decision. Stage 5 is the kitchen, where the cup of tea reveals everything. At every stage, students are questioning and reconsidering, not just following events to the end. After stage 1, students rank 4 things Alfred may fear: losing his job, the police, his father finding out, or facing his mother. Backing their top choice with evidence from the text push them towards asking why that fear feels biggest right now and what it reveals about him. For B2 students, add which fears does Callaghan want us to focus on and how do they know this? Now, before reading about Mrs. Higgins' arrival, groups build a frozen scene, a still, silent snapshot, showing how they expect her to walk in. Angry and storming in, or ashamed, unable to look at Alfred, calmed and controlled, hiding what she feels, desperate to protect her son. Once having physically built that expectation, the students are more invested in what actually happens. So, when she enters with unexpected calmness, the contrast lands even harder. This is where Mrs. Higgins actually arrives, and it's worth noting how much control she shows. She doesn't argue. She doesn't claim Alfred is innocent. She doesn't beg. She speaks quietly, acknowledges the truth, and asks Mr. Carr with real composure for one more chance. Her calm, dignified response seems to influence him. He fires Alfred, but chooses not to call the police. Use the discussion questions to explore what she chooses not to say, why her composure has such an effect on Mr. Carr, and what Alfred might be feeling as he watches her. Rather than putting one student alone in the hot seat, 3 students work together as a Mr. Carr team and can quietly consult before answering. The class prepares questions in advance: why he called Alfred's mother, what reaction he expected, and why he ultimately decides to fire Alfred without calling the police. Students aren't just recalling events here. They're stepping into an adult's perspective to explain a decision the story never fully explains for them. Before the kitchen scene, draw a line in your classroom. Students take a position on a line. Is Mrs. Higgins completely calm? Is she hiding powerful things? Or are they unsure? This activity keeps her emotions from being reduced to a simple calm or upset choice. Students can show degrees of feeling. After reading the kitchen scene, let them reconsider and move. Many may shift, and that visible movement helps the change in understanding stick. Okay, here's where the cup of tea from the first activity finally pays off. In the drugstore, she's calm, composed, giving nothing away. But in the privacy of the kitchen, believing she is alone, her hand trembles as she pours the tea, and the cost of years spent protecting and worrying about Alfred becomes visible. Make sure your class sees what Alfred sees. Not punishment, not anger, quiet, physical proof of what his choices have cost her. Don't explain the title yourself. Let the kitchen scene do the work. Ask what all the years refers to and what it costs Mrs. Higgins, and what Alfred notices for the first time. The ending only shows the beginning of his awareness, not confirmed remorse or lasting change, and that is deliberate. It's a good spot for stronger students to dig in. Has Alfred really changed or just had one moment of clarity? Now, bring the class back to the same four corners activity we did earlier. They can stay where they originally chose or move. Then ask the most important question of the unit. Is Alfred's greatest consequence losing his job or finally understanding what his behavior has done to his mother? One is public and immediate. The other is private and emotional. And the activity helps students see that the loudest, most visible punishment isn't always the one with the deepest effect. This final lesson is where we connect everything you've built to a situation students are increasingly facing nowadays. Using AI for schoolwork. Be very clear up front. The goal isn't to declare all AI use dishonest, but to bring the same questions the story raises: honesty, trust, ownership, responsibility into a context that's part of their own lives. Frame it around four questions. Who did the thinking? Who produced the work? Did real learning happen? And were the rules followed? These questions help students understand not just what a rule says, but why it exists. Now we're going to do another stance line. Draw a line across the room again, this time for AI use. Helpful use on one end, it depends in the middle, and cheating on the other. Give 5 scenarios from asking AI to explain a word to copying an answer without understanding it, and let students stand where they think each belongs, moving after they hear classmates' reasoning. Not every scenario has one automatic answer. The goal is to get students thinking carefully about where helpful support ends and dishonest use begins. Now let's connect this to the story. A Venn diagram helps your class compare Alfred to a student who submits AI-generated work as their own. On Alfred's side, he takes physical objects and faces immediate, visible exposure. On the student side, the student receives credit for work they did not produce, and the dishonesty may remain invisible. Where they overlap, both are taking a shortcut, risking trust and facing consequences. This isn't claiming the two are identical. It shows that dishonesty can take different forms and that its consequences aren't always immediately visible. Vocabulary and grammar is embedded in the unit as you move along. Language develops alongside the story's emotional movement, not as a separate drill. Prediction modals like might and could come up during the opening mystery. Narrative tenses support retelling. Cause and effect language and contrast connectors help students explain choices. The vocabulary moves the same way, from action words like steal and consequence to emotional ones like trust, guilt, tremble, dignity, awareness, and remorse. They are introduced right as students need them. As the emotional stakes deepen, so does the language. Once the story's finished, students pick one post-reading task that asks them to engage with the ideas, not just retell it. A message from Alfred to his mother, the story retold through the 5 mystery objects, an honest AI poster for the school, or Alfred's internal monologue after the kitchen scene. Expectations adjust to the student's level, and the choice itself gives them a little ownership over how they show their understanding. The unit closes with a differentiated closed-book summative assessment. Both versions ask students to justify their answers using specific events and details from memory, not from notes. B1 students answer 6 scaffolded questions with word banks and sentence starters, focused on events, feelings, and supported reasons. B2 students answer 5 more demanding questions, including an A or B choice question. They must interpret motives and support their ideas with detailed textual evidence. These 4 words capture the whole arc: predict, perform, discuss, connect. They haven't just read about Alfred's mistake. They've questioned, moved, taken positions, compared perspectives, and revised their thinking. That is what turns an older story into a mirror for today's choices, and what makes this unit as much about life as it is about literature. Our choices have hidden emotional costs, and they can create unseen ripple effects that fall directly on the people who trust us the most. I hope you enjoy teaching this unit. If you enjoy it, so will your students. I will be uploading more units in the future, so subscribe so you'll be notified when the next one is up. Good luck.